Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge with business owners, and this is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, then please visit our website, biz-smart.co.uk, and go to the Smart Room page. Our host joining me today is BizSmart Core Advisor and Select Member Gill Hutchinson. But before we start the webinar, can I ask you all to use the question mark function on your screen to post any questions that you may have for Gill, and she will do her best to answer them all at the end of the session. Thank you, Gill. Over to you.
Thank you, Caroline. Good morning, everyone. I want to talk today about converting suspects to prospects and how we join these two processes together, what we call sales and marketing. It's not so easy in an SME, in a small business, because quite often it's the same person or it's a very small team doing both of these tasks. But in a large organisation, they're often separated. So they'll have completely different staff and different offices, different management structures, and often different cultures as well, which gets quite interesting. And sometimes that cultural clash gets a bit like a blame culture. Anything that goes amiss, they're always pointing the finger at the other team. So it can be fun. So you get that sort of internal competition in a large company. So that often happens because they seem to be sort of competing for the same management time. There'll be a certain amount of commercial money for sales and marketing together, and they're quite often seen as trying to grab the biggest share of that. So the marketing people want more for advertising, the sales guys might want some more promotions, and of course we've got to meet the demands of the end users for your product or service. But often in a larger company there'll be a trade demand from commercial buyers sat in the middle of that relationship as well. So that's where things get fun. So let's just start with a little starter for 10 definitions and what we're trying to achieve from these processes. So there are loads of definitions of marketing, and there are quite a few for sales, but I've just put some in front of here that I thought you might find useful. So for the marketing one, what's important is a structured program of activity, so having a plan. And we're aiming to deliver a predictable flow of these warm prospects into the sales team, the sales pipeline. We don't want too many at once. A nice steady flow is ideal, and that's what we're aiming to achieve. The sales definition, again, it's a systematic process because systems work well here, and it's repetitive and measurable milestones in that process. And what's happening during that is the salesman is offering their product or service to a buyer or buyers, and they're trying to, the buyers are trying to achieve the goal, but there's some money involved, and it's determining how much money and how that works. It's a selling process. And then two more definitions that I want to use. A suspect is a person or an organisation that fits a rough template. So we think a typical customer looks like this. So they've got the characteristics or the sort of pain that we fix. So somebody we haven't specifically identified, but a person or organisation we think could be a customer for us. And a prospect is when you're actually dealing with a person or a small group of people who are buying from you, and they're identified by name, and it's actually dealing one-to-one with them. So we've got separate and distinct sales and marketing processes. The behaviours and what we're trying to achieve, our objectives are different for each. So let's start with marketing. Typically, an SME marketing activity will look a little bit like this if you haven't gone through this process of defining what you're trying to achieve. So you'll do some activity. Usually you repeat what you do the previous year because you're frightened of missing out if you don't. That's very typical with trade shows, for example. Quite often we keep an eye on what our competitors are doing, and we copy them or try to keep up with them. There's often not very much measurement. Sometimes marketing is easy to measure, sometimes it's a bit trickier, and that gets put in the too difficult to do box. A big frustration is that we're spending faster than we return, that we get the measurement returned because we're trying to keep up with everybody. And it's a sort of a hope strategy, if you like. We hope that loose assortment activities are going to generate some quality leads and inquiries. So it's a little bit woolly. There's quite often no marketing plan and a lack of structure. So that's typically what an SME company will start off doing with their marketing. So my next slide is sort of think, what should it be doing? Let's get away from whether I'm having a new website or writing a new leaflet. What should it be doing? And essentially, we are creating demand that we know that customers are going to be profitable for us. So it's about creating demand, which then the sales team can convert into customers. So good marketing activity is just feeding that sales pipeline with that regular flow of leads. And again, some of you have heard me talk before. I like to talk about good marketing being this attractiveness activity, thinking of yourself as a magnet. We need to attract the right potential customers from this list of suspects. So we're quite often thinking about who do we need to talk to, and we'll define some suspects and companies or characteristics we believe would make them a good customer. It might be business size or geography or what sector they're in. And it's all about building a relationship of trust. And then when they're ready to buy, they come to us ready to buy, we hand over to sales. So a good sales generation process, a good marketing process is going to feed our sales pipeline. So it will have these characteristics. It will be running all the time. It doesn't stop. We want a continual flow, not all at once, because we can't cope with that. So we've got to quantify and find enough suspects to deliver the business growth. So when you look at your business plan, your overall objective, what's the required growth you need, and does our process deliver enough new customers to satisfy that demand, that growth? So we want to efficiently and continuously convert those suspects to prospects, which we're going to hand on. It will also do some other things. It will help retain and develop existing customers. So whether we're cross-selling or upselling to existing customers, it will cover that too. But what's important is to track and refine our performance and look at these performance indicators that are going to help us check that we are on track. But tracking and refining and improving is great. And then replenishing, constantly adding more people to the suspect pool so we can start to build a relationship with them as they drop out, either because it's a no or because they've gone through the sales funnel and become customers. So that's what our marketing should be doing. And the next slide gives you a little bit of a funnel. We often find sales and marketing people talk about funnels. So this is my funnel, and into the top we're going to put the occasional lead and the occasional referral into a group of people who we think might become customers, our suspects. So we haven't got a name for them, but we know their characteristics. You might also want to add your current customers into your pool, because they might not be buying everything you offer. So they might want to go from a lower grade product to a more premium product, or you might be able to cross-sell to them and sell them a completely different product or service as well. They're the easiest people to convert because they already know you and they trust you. And occasionally we'll put lapsed customers. So perhaps people we've dealt with in the past and they've just drifted away a little bit. But maybe if we approach them again and we've got something new and different to offer them, they'll get excited and become customers once again. So into that list of suspects then, we then have something we call qualification. So what we want is a smaller suspect pool. This is to do with cost. You can market to everybody, but the bigger your suspect pool, the more expensive it is. So if you can define a pool of quality suspects, you can spend a little bit more money on each one and it's more effective, certainly in a B2B environment where we're trying to approach other businesses to be customers. Having a small suspect pool, but a good quality one, is great. So we're now going to do some marketing to them, but we're going to do it in a proactive way. We're just not going to sit there and hope they come to us. We're going to send them some information and gather data about how they respond so we can improve the process. But getting them engaged and seeing how they engage with the materials is important. So it's typically in a B2B environment, you want to be doing quite a few touches, quite a few marketing activities that they'll see. It'll be across different media, and it's staying on the radar long enough so that when they do get to the point where they want to do something about their pain, you're on the radar. So that's ideally what we want to do. You might have a shorter one, it might work for some. Occasionally it's longer, so there are some selling cycles that are 18 months, 2 years, and even longer, particularly when you get into sort of engineering territory. So we're going to have a proactive marketing plan, and from that we're going to get some qualified prospects. So these are people we've definitely identified. They're interested, they may even be contacting you. They're not hard work to get interested because they've seen your material and they want to talk to you. So at this point, you completely hand over the marketing function and they go into the sales pipeline. So we go into this distinctive and separate process that is the sales process. So let's have a little chat about sales. So again, a typical SME, perhaps they haven't thought very carefully about their selling process, so this is what they tend to do without looking at it very carefully. So the common mistakes are they don't really have a system. And if you don't have a system for selling to someone, the buyer will take control. The buyer will be in control. So they will decide when a conversation happens or if it happens. They'll decide when to meet or if to meet, who's going to be in the meeting. They will decide the agenda, what's going to be discussed. They will quite often go fishing for free information. Sometimes they're just consulting you because they want to beat up their current supplier on price. So they've no intention of buying from you. They're just seeing how much information they can get from you. So it's not always a straightforward and open relationship, particularly if your buyer is a professional buyer and they're really quite canny about these things. So what you end up with is quite often every negotiation will be different. There won't be a process unless you define one. And you quite often give a lot of information away, what we call free or unpaid consulting, which can be very frustrating. Qualification process. Qualification or disqualification quite often doesn't happen. If you don't qualify and you allow everybody into your sales funnel, you can spend an awful lot of time and effort on people that are never going to buy from you. So the better your qualification process is, the more efficient it will be. And disqualify early if you can. Disqualify people who are the time wasters and not serious, because you'll just end up spending a resource and get frustrated about it. And quite often, whoever's doing the selling will worry about the sales process. If you don't define it and the buyer's in control, well, there's all worries about what's going to happen next, or when it's going to happen next, or what they're going to say, or what they're going to do, what they're going to bowl at you. So quite often that's a source of angst, which may or may not be necessary. And if you don't have a process and a system, the salesman can't get somebody else to help. So if he goes on holiday, everything grinds to a halt. If he's not there doing his own particular, I'm using his, it could be a her, I'm sorry about that, but they're sticking to their own system and their own little way of doing things. So having a company-wide way of doing things is helpful because somebody else can take over. They will know what stage they're at, they will know what's happened in the past, and they'll be able to pick up that relationship. And quite often there's little or no measurement. That happens across sales and marketing. So that's typically what an SME will start off with. But if we think about what they should be doing, it is simply to convert sales prospects that come to you from marketing and make them into customers. And if they're not right to be customers, disqualify them as quickly as possible. Once they become a customer, once you've sold your product or service, it's all about onboarding them, getting used to you and learning about each other, building that relationship of trust. And you might go into some sort of account management mode. If you're dealing with customers over a long term, you'll have some sort of account management activity. And that in itself, if you have good account management, will generate more leads and suspects which you feed into the funnel at the top. So everybody wins, both sales and marketing help each other out. So let's look at a sales process that is structured. Now I've borrowed this from Sandler Sales, from Nigel Dunnand, who's a specialist advisor with BizSmart. And it looks a bit complicated, it's quite detailed, but let's have a look at the overall structure, because it's the overall structure that's really important. So although this process will vary from company to company, I've just got this is a good typical process. It will start with an initial call, so the lead will come in, there'll be typically a phone call, and then setting up a meeting or several meetings, particularly if it's a technical issue or requires a lot of information to be agreed. And then the series of meetings or meeting will end with a proposal being presented, and the buyer will say yes or no. So you win or lose the sale. So things to note then. is that you start this process with the confirmation that your criteria is right, that you have got a good prospect. And if you realise early on the phone call, hopefully if you can, that this prospect isn't on profile for you, it saves everybody time, hassle, resources and money if you get them out of the sales funnel and concentrate your time on the ones that are right. In a typical company, the time of the salespeople is often the most expensive resource that they have to keep busy. So if you go further down that process with your expensive people, that clogs up the whole system and you're not going to get the sale at the end. So if you realise early on, or you ask the right questions early on, so you can disqualify people early on if they're never going to buy from you, that's a good thing, that's not a bad thing. And then you concentrate on the ones that are going to be good prospects for you. And then the other thing that I think is worth noting is that there are very clear goals set at each stage. So there's a yes, and what does that look like? So from the phone call it goes on from a meeting, from the meeting it goes on to proposal, and the proposal goes to the win or the loss. It's a very clear yes. And a very clear no if they disqualify themselves, if they're unsuitable. Occasionally, you might get, it's not the right time, and they're not quite ready for buy. And that's fine as long as you have a process to kick them out of the sales process and stick them back into marketing. And that works really well, so that they're staying in touch with you and they're coming back to the sales process when it is the right time. So a good process then, the objective of a good sales process is to avoid all those stalls, particularly at the end when you've invested all that time and effort in each prospect. So prospect will hide from you. So they look really interested and enthusiastic, and then you put the proposal in front of them and they either don't answer your phone calls anymore, or they cancel the meeting, or they send you an email saying this isn't quite what we wanted, or can you take that off, or the price is too high, or whatever. So those are stalls. So we definitely want to avoid those. We want to try and avoid the free consulting, although it's almost inevitable there'll be some, because they want to build the trust that you can actually fix the problem. So it's managing that process. And the other one, which is a horrible one to get, is neither a yes or a no, and they say, oh, we'll go and think it over. When they say they'll go and think it over, that's probably a no, but they just don't want to tell you so, and they're just being a bit more polite. So be careful. A think it over is usually a no. And then the other thing to note, that a good selling process is typically relatively fast. If you think you might be marketing to people and building trust with suspects for some time, it might be weeks or months. Up to 6 weeks is a good sales process. So once they're ready to buy, that should be efficient. Everyone should know what they're doing, and that process should go ahead fairly smoothly. And again, if your marketing process is good and you're generating the right prospects, there shouldn't be any reason why that sales process shouldn't be quick. So we've got two separate processes. We've got a marketing process feeding through leads, prospects into our sales process. So this is how we join the dots. So typically, the responsibility of the marketing department will be one set of people, and the sales will do the handling the prospect. And then once you've got a customer, it's a mixture between sales and marketing. So make sure if you're splitting this in a different way, or one person's responsible across those things, that you actually have defined two separate processes. And what we're trying to achieve, what's our objective each time? So for the marketing, we're building trust. We want somebody to trust us and come to us. Once you've got a prospect, you identified you want to sell to them. Once you've got a customer, it's a continual advice and staying in touch. So that relationship can be, an analogy I like to use is a dating one when you're marketing them, and you're trying to establish ground rules and who does what. An engagement is fairly short process when you decide that you are right for each other, and their marriage hopefully is for life, and you hang on to them, and you've understood their quirks, and you get to know them even better. So think of the relationship as dating, engagement and marriage is not a bad analogy. Time period we talked about, marketing could be a long time, several months. Selling should be quick, and hopefully if you've got it right, you've got a customer for a long time. Maybe not a lifetime, but typically a long time, because we've got our marketing and our selling process right. So what actions do we have to display? Be consistent and clear. In your marketing, don't try and be all things to all people. We're targeting a certain suspect. We know what characteristics they have. We understand their pain. You refine it over time, but be consistent, clear. Don't change your messaging too much. During the selling process, we want to get to a proposal. So we want that proposal to be a good quality one, everybody's happy with. That's what we're aiming to do. And then customer service is the ongoing relationship. So customer service can mean lots of different things for different companies, but it is really getting to know that customer, hopefully getting them to generate you some leads and referrals, which is an ideal customer. So our behaviour is slightly different. For marketing, we need to be persistent, saying the same message, don't confuse anybody, just keep going, be a little bit persistent. Selling, it's urgent, that we need some sort of quick process that's going to get us to that proposal. But when you've got a customer, it's all about reliability. Can they continue to trust you, and keeping that relationship fresh? So flow of information for the customer as they approach you should be absolutely seamless. It might be 3 different people doing those things or teams of people, but from the customer's point of view, any handover from one person to the next or to a third should be as seamless as possible. It should be absolutely invisible if you've got a really good system. So finally, one little note, it's about measurement and learning. So we've got a defined marketing process, we've got a good qualification process, we've got a good sales process, and it's generating us the right kind of customers. Each of those processes, as we're talking to businesses, approaching them and getting feedback about whether it's right for them or not right for them, we're going to learn. We're going to learn about that suspect pool and how to make it better. We're going to learn most from our customers, but we will also learn through our marketing process and our sales process. So having those defined, having a formal feedback session really helps. So even if they're separate people or separate teams of people, we're talking the same language, we're reviewing the same data, and we're hopefully working together to achieve the process of acquiring more profitable customers. And it often helps, it's not always possible, but it often helps if you can integrate your software. IT software that goes seamlessly from marketing automation to CRM data and lead tracking data. If you've got that all in one place and it's shared between the sales team and the marketing team, that really helps. But essential to make it work well is that everybody cooperates. So that's when it gets interesting, when you get bigger teams and they have different agendas. But essentially, good cooperation between the teams and sharing of that data will get you the best results.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill. We'll see if there's any questions come through for you. Yeah, you've got one from Tim, and he asks, I've just hired a business development person covering sales and marketing. I feel they interviewed well, but now I'm not sure if they will be successful. What can I do?
Oh, the nightmare, Tim. So having a great interview and getting the good rapport is a good start, but the advice is to make sure you have all your processes mapped, because this one person in business development is going to be responsible for the marketing process and the selling process, and maybe the customer service, ongoing customer service as well. So you can really help a new recruit by making sure those processes are mapped and there are numbers and goals against them, so that you can review those, so you've got some accountability. And if there are problems at any stage of the process or things are getting stuck, you can focus your effort on helping that person develop that particular skill. So hire somebody if they interview well, they have the right attitude, because that's the hardest thing to put in. Sales can be very hard. But if they're prospecting and selling, they need to be quite robust and good at taking no's. So you probably need to support them, particularly when they start. And the other thing that people tend to do, whoever you hire, it's unusual to get somebody who's really good at marketing and at selling, because they are different roles, and you're accountable for different actions, and the skills required can be very different. And people tend to do, if you leave them to choose their own role, they will tend to do the things that they like and they do really well, and they'll try and avoid the things that they're not so good at and they need a bit of support with. So if you've got a process mapped, if you haven't got it, start off by getting that process mapped, So you can start thinking about how we're moving prospects through the funnel, through the whole marketing, building trust, through the selling process, becoming customers. Where are the sticking points? If you're looking at those, monitoring those KPIs, you'll see where the difficulties are arising, and then you can concentrate on those. So if you've got a person who's neglecting a particular stage because they might not be very comfortable on the phone, for example, or they're not very assertive in meetings and they let the buyer take over, whatever that is, you can work on that, because that's a very wide skill set you've asked somebody to be good at. So there's bound to be some things they're really good at and natural at, and things that need some attention. So hopefully that will help.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question, one from Kevin this time. Where does marketing and lead generation cross over with online marketing and sales? For example, if we are selling an online course or product, and is it a relevant distinction?
If you're selling something online, you don't have a complicated sales process, because they will take themselves through it. So essentially, you're probably doing a good bit of marketing activity, digital marketing with social media, engaging with your website and so on. And they're deciding for themselves whether to buy for you. So if it's a simple sale, you don't really need a sales process. They will just take themselves through it, and you don't have to worry about it. But your marketing should be giving them all the messages that give them all the information they need to make that decision. So a good marketing process for an online sale, even though it's all digital, will be presenting relevant information that you know customers who've bought it want to know through that selling process about your product or service.
Okay, thank you very much. I think those are all your questions for at the moment. Thank you, Gill, for hosting today's webinar. I will send out a copy of the presentation and Gill's contact details out to you all very shortly. So if you do have any questions, then please email Gill direct. Before we close, just a quick reminder, this webinar is part of our service to our Smart Room members. And if you're not already a member or a BizSmart client or would like to access our archive of webinars, then you can do so by visiting our website biz-smart.co.uk and go to the Smart Room page. That's the end of today's BizSmart webinar. Thank you all for listening, and we hope you can join us again very soon.